everybody, and welcome to a ASMR video covering World of Tanks. In this video, we'll be taking a kind of a little look at what's in my garage in World of Tanks. I'm not going to be going over any gameplay or game mechanics. All this video is going to really be is just kind of, reading a little bit about the history and some of the modules and going over a lot of numbers regarding these tanks in-game. I may speak a little bit as to how they play, but don't expect any gameplay or in-depth game knowledge, especially from me. But if anybody wants to see like a beginner's guide to World of Tanks or some gameplay footage of World of Tanks, just feel free to let me know in the comments, and I'll be more than happy to oblige that request. Personally, I've been out of the game for a little while. I stopped playing around Christmas of this year, Christmas 2023. I bought like maybe $100 worth of loot boxes and got like, I think 2 tanks out of it. I got the G-SOR 1010 and I got the Type 63 out of these loot boxes. Got like a boatload of premium time, but I just never made use of it. I got a bunch of gold out of it though, so luckily I should be able to purchase an amount of premium time with a gold regardless. But that's enough of talking about World of Tanks. Let's talk about the tanks in particular, starting from left to right. Starting with the American tanks. This is the M24 Chaffee, number 594. I think this was like a Christmas reward tank or something like that. Essentially just a free garage slot. But let's go over a little bit of the history of the light tank M24 Chaffee. One of the American projects in 1946 was testing of the M24 Chaffee with the suspension from the German SD KFC-8. Its chassis was with staggered wheel arrangement. As you can see, the overlapping road wheels here, and tracks with needle bearings, had excellent movement characteristics and was of great interest to researchers. Testing on solid terrain yielded satisfactory results, which could not be said about soft terrain. I could imagine, just looking at it, you would get mud, kind of caked mud or dirt, kind of stuck between these overlapping road wheels, and it would be a bit of a nightmare to get out. In general, there were no obvious advantages of using this suspension compared to the standard M24 Chaffee suspension. Testing was stopped and the project was terminated. Let's take a look at the modules for the Chaffee. So let's pop in the research tab, and as you can see here, it uses a 75mm gun, T13E1. It's a tier 5 gun. It does 110 average damage with armor piercing, 110 with APCR, and 175 with high explosive. It has an average of 96 millimeters of penetration with standard rounds, 143 with premium, and 38 millimeters of penetration with HE. It fires every 4.4 seconds. Yeah, it fires 4.4 seconds. Has a rate of fire of 13.6 rounds a minute, and has a DPM of 1500. 0.38 dispersion is not great, but 1.5 second aiming time is pretty good. It doesn't have much armor. As you can see, it's got 25 millimeters of hull plating, 38 millimeters of turret plating, 25 on the sides, and 19 on the back of the hull, and 25 on the rear of the tank. It's a pretty good looking tank, I can't really deny that. Looks like it's got 15.58 horsepower per ton, which is good, I guess. Does 56 kilometers an hour and 20 in reverse, and traverses at 52 degrees a second. I don't know if that's good camo or not. I really don't know. That is really bad view range though. 360 for a light tank is pretty tragic. To put the 360 meters of view range into perspective, I recently obtained this Asmrtalking 4H, and it's got the stock turret, still the regular turret, and I put coated optics on there and vents, and it's got 384 meters of view range now. So I can outspot a Chaffee, a stock Chaffee, but if you were to put, say, optics on this, you'd get 396. What if I do optics and vents? Vents, optics. That would be 405. I am fairly certain I can get the Panzer IV up to roughly 390. If I used food, I could probably get it up to about the same level of view range. That's not great. So moving along, we have the converted medium tank T3. This thing looks very similar to like a BT series tank, and that's because it uses the Christie style suspension, which was interesting. I believe it used coil springs from each road wheel angled up inside the hull, which robbed the crew of a lot of interior space, which is unfortunate. Oh, I forgot to mention, the M24 Chaffee has a whopping 550 hit points at tier 5, and the converted medium tank T3 has 450 at tier 3. Light tanks kind of got hit with the Nerf hammer a while back, and they've been having a tough time recovering. Some of them, anyway. I should probably go over the crew as well, come to think of it. The M24 requires a commander, a gunner, a driver, a radio operator, and a loader. Alright, now I can move on to the converted medium tank T3. On March 25th, 1931, the U.S. Armaments Department and the U.S. Wheel Track Layer Corporation, led by John W. Christie, that's the man who designed the suspension of this tank, signed a contract to develop 5-wheeled Caterpillar tanks. In 3 months, the number increased to 7. The production vehicle was based on the convertible medium tank M1931 prototype that had failed testing in early 1931 on Aberdeen Proving Ground and was later sold to the UK. That's a classic maneuver right there. Offload junk to a foreign country. 3 of the 7 vehicles were named Convertible Medium Tank T3 and were used by the infantry, and the remaining 4, named Combat Car T1, went to the cavalry. The tanks saw service until 1937. Only 1 vehicle has survived to this day. One thing that I really do appreciate about World of Tanks is the modeling work that they've done. Wargaming actually has done one thing really well with World of Tanks, and it's the visuals. It's an extremely pretty game, especially the tank models. They are great to look at. I can never forgive them for messing with the garage and the garage music though. So let's go over some numbers. The Combat Car T3 has a 37mm Browning semi-automatic cannon. It utilizes a magazine loading system with 8 shells in the magazine. Wait a minute. I'm pretty sure it's got a 4-shot magazine, but each pull of the trigger gets you 2 shells. But regardless, it does an average of 40 damage, with an average penetration of 48mm on standard rounds and 70 on premium. It has an average damage per minute of 1021. It's a very lightly armored tank. As you can see, it has 13mm of all-around hull armor, 16mm of all-around turret armor. It weighs 11.2 tons and has an engine power of 366. That is with a turbocharger. It travels at 52 kilometers an hour in forwards and 22 in reverse, with a specific power of 32 horsepower per ton, which is quite good. Quite good. Has 306 meters of view range, which is remarkably bad. This was a gift vehicle. I think it was a Christmas gift or something like that. I can't remember. Wargaming has a history of giving out really lackluster gift tanks, and I think this is one of them. Next up is Patton the Tank. I think this is another holiday gift, or like a New Year's gift, just based on the skin. I think it's just a regular M48 Patton. I don't really know because I've never gone down the American medium line. As you can tell, I don't even have any equipment or consumables for this. It came with a crew, but that's the only reason there's one in there. So let's take a look here. Medium tank, Patton the Tank, a variant of the M48A2 tank with a T54E2 turret and 120mm T123E6 gun. In 1958, the prototype underwent comparative trials aimed at choosing the armament for the new US XM60 medium tank. Cool. Yeah, that's really nice, I guess. It's a good looking tank. I can't really lie, it's an attractive looking tank, but I just, logged back in and I got a free tier 9, which seems a little bit bad for the game, considering the highest tier I I actually got to legitimately was tier 8, you know. So it's got a 120mm gun, does 400 average damage with 242 average penetration on its armor-piercing rounds. With high explosive anti-tank, you're looking at 300 average penetration. It loads a shell every 5.35 seconds and has a loading time of 11. Oh, my mistake. It fires 5.35 rounds a minute and has an 11.22 second loading time. It traverses the gun at 36 degrees per second and has 10 degrees of gun depression, which is fairly important. 2.4 second aiming time is not great, not terrible. 0.38 dispersion is pretty bad though. 2100 DPM is... it is what it is. 1700 hit points. 152 millimeters of hull armor. 230 millimeters of turret armor. And this is all, it's all raw value. Effective value for the patent would be, I'll start doing this with these higher tier tanks, and low tier armor really doesn't matter outside of very specific circumstances. So let's take a look here. The camera is locked. Okay, great. So effective. It's about 250 to over 370. Depending on the angle, it's like 400, 500 millimeters of effective angling. It's got this tumor of a cupola though. And the hull is fairly easy to penetrate at a flat angle. As you can see, the thickest portion is 236 millimeters of effective plating, which means there is a chance that you will be able to penetrate it with the average penetration of this gun fairly easily. I've never played it. I have no thoughts on the tank beyond the numbers, so let's move on to the T1 heavy tank, which I've put a fairly garish camo on, you know, with the cats and everything. I think it looks pretty cool. But I am currently trying to 2-mark the tank, and it's not going well. This is a very difficult tank to play properly. It's very competitive. Well, it's not difficult to play properly, it's difficult to compete with everybody else because everybody else is getting all these crazy results in it. I'm about 100 average damage short of where I need to be to 2-mark the tank, but I got a little bit of time before I get to that. But I always thought the T1 Heavy and the M6 were honestly pretty cool looking tanks. Like, they were fairly attractive tanks. I get the feeling I'm probably the only one in the world who feels that way. But the T1 Heavy is kind of a heavy in name only. It's got some turret armor, but not enough to be reliable, especially when you're facing people who fire premium rounds, like me. The hull armor is kind of a joke, but a little bit trolly at times. You can't really side scrape either because you've got this angled portion of hull armor that makes it impossible to do so. So when you peek out, they can just pen your side right there. So let's go over the history of the T1 Heavy. The development of the T1E2 started in the USA in May 1940. The vehicle was designed as a heavy tank. The distinctive features of the vehicle were a cast hull and a hydromechanical transmission with a double-disc hydraulic converter. Later, the tank was designated the M6. A total of 9 vehicles, one of which was experimental, was produced. The tank never saw action, which is a little bit unfortunate. You know, the bread boxes, the T1 and the M6, it's a little bit unfortunate they never saw combat. I think they'd be I wouldn't go so far to say as effective, but I think it'd be interesting to see. As you can see, it's got a bit of M3 Lee syndrome, where you've got like 6 dudes crammed into this tank somehow. Which is a bit comical. It's not as comical as one of these British early tier tanks. I think it's the Cruiser 2. It's one of these that has like an insane amount of people crammed inside of it. Yeah, the Cruiser 1. You look at this tiny little, teeny tiny tank, and you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 men crammed into this box. It's pretty wild. But back to the T1 Heavy. It has a very rapid firing 76mm gun that has almost as good DPM as a tier 9 medium. It has better DPM than a tier 9 medium, which is insane to think about. It deals 115 average damage with an average standard pen of 128 and an average premium pen of looks like 177. It fires 19.5 rounds a minute and loads in 3 seconds flat. That's with a gun rammer, 100% crew, but no brothers in arms. Once I get brothers in arms, it's going to be down to like less than 2 seconds. You get 10 degrees of gun depression, which is fairly critical because your turret is like the only good part about the tank in terms of armor. You get a good old bit of hit points though, 910. Back in the day, hit points used to be a function of vehicle weight. Not anymore, I don't think. You've got 95mm of hull armor, which is not really angled, and it's this portion right here, which is 95. The lower cast section, I think, is thinner. You get 178mm of frontal turret armor and 83 at the sides and rear. 52mm of side and 46mm of rear hull armor means, you know, you're only really effective from the front. It's quite a fast, heavy tank, especially with a turbocharger. It weighs 60 tons, has over 1,000 horsepower with a turbo, 17.46 specific power, which is a lot more than the Chaffee, which is a light tank. So you will see that 40km/h top speed fairly regularly, and it's quite a good vehicle for ramming. I would recommend taking controlled impact on your driver at some point, because it's just a monster when it comes to ramming stuff. It's got no camo, and it's a V range of 354 meters base, which is alright, I guess, for a heavy tank. As you can see, it's got a coaxial 37mm cannon, which is a novel feature. Now we can move along to its big brother, the M6, which I have indeed two-marked the vehicle. I put this insane orange skin on it, which I found incredibly comical, so I did it. mainly because the M6 is one of my favorite tanks to play because it's hopelessly broken. Wargaming did a classic maneuver of, instead of moderately buffing the tank, they just made it extremely overpowered for no real reason. The M6 has better DPS than a lot of tier 9 mediums and some heavies at 2500 DPM at tier 6 with 160 standard pen but 243 millimeters of premium pen, which is stupid. Like, that's, if I go to my tier 8 tank, right, tier 8 T32, it gets 218 millimeters of standard pen and 250 millimeters of premium pen, so you get tier 8 penetration, really, if you hit the 2 key. At tier 6, this is an insanely competitive tank, and the damage requirements to mark the tank really reflect that. This was an incredible challenge to actually get marked up, mainly because the requirements are so high for it. It's difficult to... Oh, off-road driving, okay. It's difficult to just get that consistent damage in every game. Especially in +2, -2 matchmaking. But let's see what Wargaming has to say about the history of the tank. That's bullshit. It's not a support heavy, it is, well, maybe it is, because you don't have any armor to speak of, really. You get a little bit more than the T1, you get more on the turret, but you can never rely on the armor in this vehicle. Never. You can rely on your insane DPM, and you can rely on people underestimating the reload time, which is 5 seconds. Or rather, it's 6 seconds, 5.75 seconds, with 100% crew, brothers in arms, vents, and a rammer. With food, you can probably get that down to right about 5.5. This is not a tank you want to sit out in front of. So, a variant of the heavy tank developed in the US from May 1940. This vehicle featured a cast hull and hydromechanical suspension with a 2-disc hydraulic converter. The vehicle was standardized on May 26, 1942. A total of 9 vehicles were manufactured, but none ever saw action. Okay. Yeah, so it's a T1. The difference between the T1 and the M6 is the gun. On the M6, you get a 90mm fast-firing gun. And that makes all the difference. You essentially more than double your alpha damage and get like an extra 300 DPM, which is stupid. When you're facing, -2 matchmaking, this thing can see tier 4 tanks, which is retarded. It really shouldn't see tier 4 tanks. Even against like tier 5s, the thing's insanely overpowered. I can't even begin to describe some of the absolute carnage this tank causes on the battlefield. And now we can move along to the Polak tank. I have also managed to mark this tank. I'm trying to mark all the tanks before I move on to the next one, but I kind of got bored in the American line, so I, kind of bought the next tier and kept going with it. But I'm gonna really knuckle down and try and get these marks up at some point. But this was a pain in the ass to mark because the DPM is low. The armor is consistent enough, but you don't have the gun depression. You get -5 degrees of gun depression. M6 gets double that, which is great, but you have great turret armor, and you can't really take advantage of it unless you get behind like a stationary object. The Pollack can't side scrape very well. This entire front portion is like an automatic penetration because it's like 20 millimeters on the hatch. You can get overmatched so easily. It's got problems. What the Pollack does have is great hold down capability and good alpha damage. It's got shit tier DPM, awful dispersion. I forgot to mention the M6 has great, for a heavy tank of this tier, great dispersion at 0.36. I'm not even gonna bother to go over the fucking numbers on this thing. Just be aware the M6 can and will do like 40 k's an hour, you know, because you got 1,000 horsepower, 17.53 specific power. You will do that 40 kph. This thing can get in a position early and just clean up. It's insane. But the Pollack tank, this is the beginning point of the WoT tank line, which is a unique line of heavy tanks that has a auxiliary set of tracks. The Pollack unfortunately does not have that feature. Oh yeah, you also got a bit of a cupola to worry about with the Pollack. Let's go over the history of this tank. In 1944, Leon Pollack introduced a vehicle that was built as a miniature with a cast hull. Its drive wheels were located at the front, and a 76mm gun was mounted to a turret of original design. Its crew consisted of 4 members. The vehicle was supposed to be equipped with electric transmission and a diesel engine that could accelerate it up to 40 k's an hour. However, this data could not be verified as no prototypes were built. That is a common theme with World of Tanks, a lot of paper tanks. But I mean, they're interesting to see. Like, a lot of people complain about the paper tanks and World of Tanks. But I think it's really cool to see concepts brought to life like this. So I don't really complain too much about it. I think the Pollack is a fairly alien-looking thing. Not really a good-looking tank, in my book. It's frustrating to play. Its gun handling is bad, and at tier 6 you cannot fit vertical stabilizers to improve that, which is unfortunate. But the numbers, it deals 240 average damage with 160 millimeters of penetration as standard, and about 205 or 190 for premium rounds, which is a bit bullshit, but whatever. Fires 7.8 rounds a minute and loads a shell every 7.7 seconds. You only get 5 degrees of gun depression, has a 2.39 second aiming time, which is really bad. 0.39 meters of dispersion, which is awful. And has an average DPM of 1873, which is... I mean, let's compare it to the VK3601H, which with an 88mm gun does 2200 DPM at the same tier. And nobody ever accuses the VK3601H of being overpowered. It's got 980 hit points, 127 millimeters of hull armor, which is actually very well sloped and angled. You'll find it's quite difficult to penetrate from the front until you find out about the hatch here and the driver's window, which is actually a weak spot, which is odd for wargaming to actually model something like that nowadays. Yeah, it's essentially a dead zone. 116 millimeters of effective armor, 132, but once you get higher up, it's 152 millimeters, 174, 166. Like, this whole top section, besides the little driver's window, is fairly difficult to penetrate. It can and will do 49 kph with a turbo. It has 18.64 specific power. It's a very mobile tank. And I do mean that. It's a very mobile tank. Good engine power. Great power to weight. It's got decent terrain resistances too, from what I remember, but that's just subjective. Its gun that's a little bit disappointing, if I'm honest. Overall, it's an okay tank. I didn't love my time with it, but I didn't hate playing it either. It's okay to play. Now let's move on to the next tank in the lineup, the M2Y, which is researched from the Balak, as you can see here. Now the M2Y is definitely kind of a freaky looking tank. You know, it's got that big alien looking turret with that very unfortunate cupola on top, which really compromises the turret armor, because I mean, it's so big, it's gigantic, so you have to try and gun block and wiggle to the best of your ability, and that doesn't always work out. The hull armor is acceptable, I guess. This thing's supposed to be a hull-down monster, which it kind of is, so the hull armor's not too relevant. But I'm pretty sure this is another paper tank, but it does contain the auxiliary track feature, so when you're tracked from the front, you can still move around to a degree on the auxiliary track, which is really convenient, actually. I think I just recently got this thing fully upgraded too. And from what I remember, it had a miserable stock grind, and I mean one of the worst ones I've had to deal with. Luckily though, you can fit it with a V-stab now. Gets dog shit DPM still. Just FYI. So let's go over the history a little bit. In 1953, the development of the T-95 tank family started. In June of the same year, H.L. Yo Company Incorporated introduced 7 prototypes, one of which was named the M2Y. It was suggested creating a heavy tank of the usual configuration, visually similar to the M48. However, there were many differences with the production vehicle. The turret contained only the commander and the loader, and the gunner was seated in the right side of the hull, right here, to the right of the driver. Thanks to this solution, the turret was supposed to be as narrow as possible. The project was cancelled and no prototypes were built. It's a little unfortunate, actually. So we've got 240 average damage, 202 average pen for standard, which is quite good, actually, at tier 7. I don't want to say that, it's okay. And you've got 242 premium pen. Fires a shot every 7.52 seconds. You finally get 10 degrees of gun depression with this tank. It's a 2.18 second aiming time, which is mediocre at best, and 0.39 meters of dispersion, which is still garbage. 1914 DPM is bad. You've got 1,250 hit points, 165 millimeters of frontal hull, and 229 of highly sloped and angled turret armor at the front. This thing's honestly a really well-protected tank from the hull up. The turret's very nice, the hull is alright. You can kind of side scrape with this thing finally, although I wouldn't recommend it. I'd recommend finding a place to go hull down. It can potentially do 44 kph, has 14.86 power to weight. It's alright, you know. It's not the most mobile heavy tank, but you're not gonna sit there and like complain about it. This is with a turbo, by the way. Without a turbocharger, this thing's pretty miserable. So let's keep it moving to the companion tier 7 heavy tank that you get to from the M6, the T29. I quite like this camo, by the way. The Kraken camo. I think it's pretty cool. This is another tank I'm in the progress of trying desperately to do mark. I made the mistake a while back of trying to use it with the 105mm gun, which is a mistake. The 105 is a miserable pile of dog shit that has horrific gun handling and dispersion statistics and is inconsistent to use at best. So I went with a 90mm gun and decided to pay to win, which is perfectly fine by me. This is yet another hull-down monster of a tank, which is kind of the American specialty, making hull-down tanks. It's got a minuscule cupola. Awkwardly enough, I think the mantlet is one of the more reliable spots to just kind of pen through. There's like the inner mantlet. As you can see, it's just 279mm of pen. So some tier 8s can just blast right through you with like 300 heat. But the T29 is a very, very good tank. Just don't make the mistake of trying to make the 105mm gun work. I know how exciting it is to get 320 alpha damage at tier 7, but unfortunately the soft stats, even with V-stab, do not make up for it. It's got atrocious DPM, the 105, compared to the 90mm, and it's just overall less reliable gun. Although you have to use a PCR out of the 90mm to be competitive at tier 7, which is a bit of a trade-off. But that's enough of that. Let's go over the vehicle details. Development of this experimental heavy tank started in 1944. The prototype was built in 1947. The vehicle featured the 105mm T5E1 gun, which I do not have fitted. Let's see if I can preview this thing with that. Give you guys a taste. Nope. I'm not gonna buy it again. It's 118,000 credits. So use your imagination. The vehicle featured the 105mm T5E1 gun. After the war, the mass production of heavy tanks was deemed unreasonable by a bunch of pencil-necked whatever, and only a few prototypes of this vehicle were built, which is really unfortunate because I think it's a very smart-looking tank. It's wicked cool to look at. There's no getting around that. I think it's honestly really, beautiful in a way. So with the 90mm gun fitted, it does 240 average damage with 160 mils of standard pen, but with APCR you're looking at about 230. You fire a shot every 6 seconds, which is great, and it gets you 2400 DPM. You get a whopping 10 degrees of gun depression that you should be using whenever possible. Great aim time of 1.97 seconds. pretty good dispersion at 0.35. And here's where it really gets crazy. 102 millimeters of hull armor, that's whatever, right? 279 millimeters of frontal turret armor. And look at the sloping on that. And you get more in the mantlet. In this outer section, this inner section is 279 millimeters. So you gotta be kind of careful with that. If you're looking at like a T-34, it will just blast right through the front. And I don't mean the Russian T-34. I mean the American T-34. It will just kind of go right through your mantlet with no issues. You can actually side scrape with this thing, and even reverse side scrape fairly well with it. But it's not particularly mobile. You will need a turbocharger on this tank to make it competitive. Otherwise you're stuck at 34 kph or 35 kph and a really miserable power to weight of less than 13, like 12.5. That's not good. With the turbo, it becomes acceptable. I'm not at the point where I'm gonna buy like a second equipment loadout for the tank. I might get like HP rammer stab for like a city map where I don't really need a turbo, but that's only if I'm gonna like try and get a 3 mark on the tank, I think. But moving along to my highest tier vehicle. Alright, let's move along to my highest tier tank. That isn't a gift vehicle. I don't really count Pat in the Tank. This is the T-32. You get it by researching it from the T-29. I recently got, I got my 1 mark in December before I quit playing. This is a very competitive hull-down tank. It's got great turret armor, a nice gun where you finally get over 300 alpha with decent soft stats. I never really had any issues with the soft stats on this gun, but that's because I run V-stab on it. If you don't run V-stab, you're probably going to run into problems. But this is really a good tank. It's mobile, it's got good DPM, it's got good alpha, it's got great armor. Even the hull armor is okay. You know, if you try and side scrape in it, you can still side scrape. It's versatile. All in all, it's a great little tank. I say little, but you know what I mean. I can't really pick apart one single thing and be like, oh wow, this tank really blows at it. It's great, not great, it's at least good at everything, you know. It's great at being hull down, although you do have to worry about your cupola. Here, this thing, it's only 240. Effective. If you hit it flat, you can get bounces off of it, off the sides, as it's steeply angled and all that, but if you're using your gun depression, it's only 260, which is, you know, you can pen it with premium effectively, and there's a chance you'll be able to go through it with the standard rounds. There's a chance, because that can go up like 20%, I think. There's like a 20% variation of penetration. But the T-32 is honestly a really nice tank. I recommend getting it. I haven't played the Tier 9, the M103, but I don't think it can really top the T-32 in terms of playability. But let's see what World of Tanks has to say about the history. An experimental World War II American heavy tank, developed on the basis of the M26 Pershing and the T-29 tanks. Prototypes were built in 1946, however the T-32 never entered mass production, and I'm fairly certain you can actually see pictures of these prototypes being shipped to Europe, which is really cool. But they never saw action, which is unlucky, because they would have, with a 105mm cannon, it would have pretty much destroyed anything that, Hitler had, put up against it. It's a really easy tank to play, by the way. You kind of just go hold down and click on stuff. With its 105mm gun, you get 320 average damage, 218 average standard pen, with about 232mm of premium pen, which is really nice actually. It loads around every 7.6 seconds, and that's with a rammer, but without Brothers in Arms. It has 10 degrees of gun depression, which is really good. 1.8 second aiming time, which is nice, very nice. 0.36 dispersion, which is great actually for something like this. 0.36 dispersion is actually quite nice to have. It's not incredibly accurate, but it's accurate enough, 2500 DPM with a 320 alpha, that's nice. It feels good that the DPM and the alpha strike, it all feels right, 1550 hit points is okay. 127mm of hull armor. Unfortunately, you got that machine gun to worry about. That's a weak spot, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, 156. Since it's angled more flat than the rest of it. But you don't want to rely on a hull armor. You've got 298mm of turret armor. And look how it's sloped. And then 298's behind the mantlet too. So this thing's pretty much impervious from the front. It's honestly fairly mobile too. It's not M6 mobile, but it gets around. This is with a turbocharger, by the way. 860 horsepower, specific power of 14.7, which would be about 13 stock, which is bad. 39 kph in forward, 16 in reverse. That 16 is really handy to get you out of stupid situations that you place yourself in. Not that I'd know anything about that. 395 base view range, or 390 base, is really good. If you really wanted to, you could probably drop turbo for optics, right? And get over like 400. Even with vents, that would put you at 400. Most likely when Brothers in Arms is done training, I'll be at 400 base view range, which is what you want, really. But that's pretty much the T-32 there. Unfortunately, I'm running out of time, so I think I'll go over a fairly... What the fuck is this? When did I get this shit? I've never even played... Is that Polish? I've never even played any Polish tanks. Whatever. I honestly might just sell that, because I'm not interested. Yeah, actually I'm gonna sell that right now. I don't really care about... I'll keep the crew, but... Man, I don't want this tank right now. I need the money as well. 464666. Goodbye. Honestly, I might even sell the Type 3, but that I'll do that later. Actually, hold up a sec. Commander, gunner, driver. Oh boy, I could actually train my Type 3 crew in the Type 63. I might do that. But let's move on to a fan favorite. The Matilda. Yeah, boy. Okay. The Matilda is a tier 4 powerhouse. It's got ridiculous armor, 75 millimeters all around on the turret, and pretty much 75 millimeters on the front, 70 on the sides, and 55 in the back. And it's all really well angled and sloped, and it's just a pain in the ass to deal with. Honestly, I might get rid of improved hardening and put on, what else would I put on? Maybe coated optics. I used to run it with grousers, and that was funny because like it was really fast at that point for Matilda. But this thing's obnoxious. I like playing it because it's just brain dead. Whenever I come back from a break, I just hop in the Matilda and get to work, you know. But let's take a little read. Developed from 1936 through 1938, a total of 2,987 vehicles were manufactured by August of 1943. It was only the British tank. It was the only British tank to remain in service throughout World War II. Yeah, it's really cool. So to go over the numbers, it's got 55 average damage with the Little John adapter 2-pounder gun, but you get 121 millimeters of average pen, and with the premium you get like 130, which is ridiculous at tier 4. It fires every 2 seconds. Stupid. Negative 10 degrees of gun depression, incredible. 1.7 aim time, it's alright. You actually fire quicker than you can aim the gun, which is interesting. 0.34 dispersion, 1600 DPM out of 55 average damage, which is insanity, by the way. 620 hit points. We've already gone over the armor. It is tragically slow, however. Weighs 27 tons with 200 horsepower, resulting in 7.5 horsepower per ton and a top speed of allegedly 28 kph, although you'll probably only see about 24 because you get miserable terrain resistances on the tracks. Do not run this thing without a turbocharger. It does not work. 347 meters of view range is pretty tragic, though. I might slap some coated optics on here instead of hardening. Yeah, I think I'll do that right now, actually. Either yeah, coated optics I think is a better idea. So now a 382. But this thing's a little tier 4 tower. I keep it around because it's fun. And with that, I'll have to end the video. I hope you all enjoyed. Let me know if you want some more World of Tanks content in the future. And for right now, I'll have to wish you all a good night or a good day. And I'll catch you all in the next video.